Hello, everybody. This is James Diboe on Discovering, dedicated to original peoples. As always, we got a special guest in straight from the South Pacific, Oceania, the Fiji Islands. Welcome to the show, Maika Moroca. How you doing, my brother? Good to have you on. Welcome to the show.
Bulavinaka, James, Bulavinaka, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you on the show this morning.
Excellent. Well, Fiji, I've been to the island twice. I went 2013 and 2015. Met up with the chiefs both times. I stayed in Nadi. Beautiful place, absolutely amazing people. And today, I want to discuss some things what I noticed on my journey. Speaking to a lot of people in the Fiji Islands, they were speaking about their connection come from Lake Tanganyika in East Africa, like Tanzania area and that. So I wanted to speak a bit on that and also speak on the culture of Fiji, So if we let's begin on your own personal story. So which part of Fiji are you born?
All right, I am from the province of Netasiri. Province of Netasiri falls within the Kumbuna Confederacy. This is one of the 14. Netasiri is one of the 14 provinces within Fiji. It is the 14 provinces is the way that was the Itoke are the indigenous people in Fiji. It is the way the Itoke were grouped or were classified by the colonizers, the British Empire, British colonial administration many years ago. Yeah, so they had kept the Itoke in their communal setup. So there are 14 provinces in Fiji. They had been put or classified or grouped in such a way because based on how they are linked by blood and in terms of their cultural connections and also the relations in the between the communities. The Vanua, we call it here. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So now, if you look at like your earliest history of Fiji, first migrating, to some researchers, they say 1500 BC, people reached Fiji. Now, there's different speculation of where the Fijians came from. So my interest was the connection with Africa. Now I understand we have researchers, European researchers, where they said that the Fijians came from Southeast Asia and also areas like some even like connected with the Polynesians, the people who they call the Polynesians, and they came from Taiwan and South of China, moved through Southeast Asia, and then went into the Pacific Islands. Now Fiji, it seems like that's in between Melanesia. Well, it is Melanesia, but it's right next to Polynesia, where Tonga, Samoa, and other places are, Tahiti. So from your earliest knowledge, I'm very interested in where does it come from, the connection with Africa? Is this oral history, or is it in some books that's being written down, passed down generations?
Well, it has been put into oral history in terms of chants and poem and songs and all other means of disseminating information on how they have come over. But history tells us that the early Fijians that came, the early Tokes that came from Tanganyika. Has a proven record in terms of oral history. They had traveled, well, the connections that you had highlighted with the Polynesians and the Micronesians came later on when, just lately. But in terms of the African lineage and connections, yes, we have that proven record in terms of our oral history. That our forefathers came from Tanganyika, and then somewhere in the open sea, their boat capsized, and they lost so many of their crew members, and then we still have the names of those boats that brought them over. Yeah, that's how Fiji was occupied by the Tokay. Some say that the Tokays were some of the Tokays were already here, and then some came later on. But then they're all now in oral history, yeah?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, because I mean, I've looked quite deeply into it. Like, I mean, I've spoke to a lot of the Fijians. I've also listened to some researchers like Dr. Clyde Ahmed Winters. Now, he's a very good researcher. He's explaining that the Fijians came from Africa. Now, he says the middle of Africa, meaning when the Sahara Desert was not a desert. It was green, lush lakes, vegetation. Now, he says that there's a group of people, Africans, that had to leave when the desert started to dry up. He says, so some went to Egypt and Sudan, some went to like different parts of Africa, like West Africa, South Africa, and some also left to go into places like Sumer, which is Iraq now, Iran, India, and also into the Pacific Islands as well. So it's very interesting, different. We got many different stories. I've even heard the story of like even some Fijians said, could they be the Hebrew Israelites coming from Israel? Now, one of the first things is Africans would have went to Israel anyway, so that would have just been another stop off along the way to go where else to go, because the Holy Land is Africa. This is the first place of all humanity, and this is facts. It's proven, whether orally, documented, archaeology, anthropology, so any evidence. So I thought it was very interesting. Now, one thing that I noticed myself is I always like, as a person of African descent, my roots is Nigeria from my father's side, Nigeria, and very spiritual people, very cultural people. And on my mum's side, we have Trinidad, which is in the Caribbean. We were captured into the slave trade. So things happen over the years where people lose the history, and some people
you see, James,
to keep it.
You see, James, there are many things that is similar.
Yeah.
With the Africans and us. One of which you just mentioned, and that is that we are church-going people. We love going to church, just like what you mentioned a while ago. And secondly, one other one is the living in tribes.
Yeah.
You agree? Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely the tribes. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now the church.
We live in tribes. We have the chiefs. We have all these different levels of within the community, and this is something that is true about it.
Yeah. Now the church is a little different because this is something that became later. Europeans. Now I know Ethiopia Orthodox, their Christianity is older. Now the missionaries came into places like Fiji, into parts of Africa. And they
when I said church, I was referring to the traditional way of not really the modern
okay.
Christianity. Yeah, it's the traditional rituals and all.
I totally
That's what I
understand.
was referring to. Yeah,
you're totally right.
Which is similar. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Now, another thing, I first came to the first London hotel, and I spoke to a man named Kelly. I'm not sure if he's still there. I don't know if you know anyone from the first London hotel. Okay, well, I had a little talk to him. He was saying about some similarities with the linguistics as well. And I also did research that there's some place names in the South Pacific that are similar to West African names. Now, in Zimbabwe, I think it's Zimbabwe or Zambia, there's something called Tonga I've seen. And I'm not a linguistic, but I like to research similarities. Now, Kelly was telling me that there's a lot of similarities in the language. It's so with Africa it has many different languages. Now, when we say languages, so many different dialects, and then like Nigeria
Which is similar to us.
Yeah, and many tribes, and
yeah, like in our situation, even in a province, there could be more than 5 dialects within one province.
That's right. Yeah. So that's the thing, you see.
There would be some slight changes in way people say certain words or yeah.
Yeah. I've also seen a connection where there's a story of Lake Tanganyika, and I've also seen a story of coming from Egypt also. Now, someone mentioned to me about it was actually someone from Fiji, that one of the chiefs met a woman in Fiji, met a woman in Egypt, and there was a famine that happened where he was, and that was another reason why they were sailing out into the Pacific. Now, this is just one version. That it seems like there's quite a few versions of history. So I've heard Lake Tanganyika, I've heard Southern Africa, I've heard Egypt, I've also heard about the Hebrews, West African, similar place names and similar linguistics. Now, here's the thing with West Africa, what's very important. There's a group of people called the Bantu peoples. Now, if you ever get a map up of the Bantu, they basically started in like places like West Africa, and all right from West Africa to South Africa to East Africa, you can find the Bantu linguistics and the Bantu peoples. So they're also in Madagascar as well, this Bantu lineage. So I thought, well, the Fijians, I believe that usually would be more connected with the Bantu lineage. So the Bantu lineage, if you look at the people who are in America today, people who were captured into the slave trade, majority of them of the Black Americans are Bantu, from the Bantu lineage. A lot of the people who were African people taken into different parts of the world were Bantus, and a lot of people wanted to enslave Bantus more than most other peoples. Very strong people, Bantus, so. And also there's Swahili speakers, which are Bantus again. Now they're situated in a place like Tanzania. So I was wondering that I believe that a Swahili, which is Bantu, has came into Fiji in the last couple of 1,000 years. Many reasons why, because there was a connection with Australia also. There was the archaeologists found coins, African coins, that were from Tanzania, and they were found in Australia about maybe 1300 AD. So they know that they sailed definitely as far as Australia. So then Fiji, very close to Australia also. So could it be a possibility that there was some people in Fiji in the beginning, and then, like you said before, kind of matches that some people came from Africa first, and then other migrations came later, like you said, into the Fiji Islands. So there could have been a couple of migrations to Fiji.
Yeah. There has been.
Yeah, not one migration, a couple of migrations.
A couple.
Yeah.
We have the even There's a possibility for Melanesians as well because
Okay.
of the the way
Happening.
people have come over from Tanganyika, and then the history tells that there's a place here in Fiji that's in the western side that's called Yasawa. We are told that that's where somewhere near that place was where everything capsized and the boats. There were certain records in the boat that brought them across had gone into the sea. But then this place Isawa is more blessed in terms of it's now a tourist attraction. The tourist attraction activities going around in that area, and I know it's happening in that area, and it's really bringing in income to the people around that area. So we are told that they have been blessed because of they rescued most of those that came. And then we have the connections with the Solomon Islanders and the people from Vanuatu here in the South Pacific, from PNG. We've yet to establish how all these people got connected in terms of migration.
Yeah, interesting. Now, when it comes to Black people as well, I do a lot of traveling many different places throughout Pacific, Asia, Africa, Australia, Americas. Now, I go to visit these people in Southeast Asia, and they are Black people. They're the first indigenous peoples. Now, I have to go into the rainforest to find them. So in the Philippines, I find them. They're called the Eta, a group of people that live in the mountainous areas and very short people, but Africoid features. In Thailand, I visited a group of people called the Mani. They're in a rainforest. There's not too many of them left. In Malaysia also, I find them, and in Indonesia. So it seems at one time that the planet, obviously it would have been a Black planet with people coming from Africa. And then so much has happened throughout history. Now in South of China, in the last couple of 1,000 years, there was the archaeology, and there's records of it, that everybody was Black in South of China, majority in Japan. And then things changed over the years, whether it was down to environmental change or invaders. There was a lot of invaders from ancient time, barbarians. You had the Mongols. Now, in your part of the world, if I look at like, see like the Polynesians, for example. So with the Polynesians, they came later after the Melanesians. So when the Polynesians, because some say the Polynesians came from South of China, Taiwan, and places like Southeast Asia, they were calling them Austronesian people, Austronesian. So with the Polynesians, what's the connection with the Melanesians and Polynesians?
Oh, well, I think the connections cropped during the Christianity influence in the South Pacific. This is when the churches and the missionaries started Christianizing people, winning souls to Christ, and these had opened up the doors for more consensus and more interactions, racial interactions in terms of Polynesians and Melanesians, and then intermarriages followed, and so I am dark.
Yeah.
I am dark like an African, but below the skin, I also have Polynesian blood.
Okay.
Because of my mother.
Okay.
My mother is my mother is from the Lau group of islands here in Fiji, and this is the group of islands that had the most influence of the Polynesian people.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, because they're somehow connected and close to Tonga.
That's right, Tonga. I've been to Tonga as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I speak about, I speak the main Itoke language, which is called the Mbawan language, and I speak three other
languages you speak.
dialects.
Okay,
one of which is my mom's dialect.
Right.
And then the two dialects from my.
Yeah. So there's many different dialects that you
have. That's it.
Yeah. So you see in Tonga, it's right, it's only an hour. When I went to Tonga, I noticed that like I've seen some dark-skinned people, some, but a lot of them are more lighter. Now the darker-skinned ones, I made sure I took a lot of pictures because you see Western media likes to show the lightest people. They don't want you to find black people in some places because they've already made up their mind of what they want to say people are. So everywhere I go, I'm always looking for the darker skinned people and taking pictures and interviewing them and getting their history. And this is one thing, and this is what my show's about. It's called Original Peoples. So all the hidden things I like to put on display, you know, because first people coming from Africa had to be dark-skinned people. And the people who stayed in the hot regions of the planet, they remained dark-skinned.
Yeah.
You know, that's common sense. So, so with the Polynesians now and the Micronesians, when I was in Micronesia, I went to Guam. Now, Guam, there were a lot of them were quite lighter, and they were calling themselves Chamorros, meaning like they're mixed with Spanish and part Micronesian, and they were calling the dark-skinned people the Micronesians. So I was looking for the dark-skinned Micronesians, and I got to find a few, take some pictures, have a good chat with them. They took us a few places, but I noticed that they were being treated the worst. They were being treated the worst in Micronesia. And it's funny how you go places and they trying to treat the indigenous peoples like lower. It's like another way how they can take over a place, you know, got very Americanized, Guam. So now, like I say, I can see majority of the Pacific are, I can see the majority of black people. And it seems like over the years, when Europeans have mixed in, or Asians, like Asians have mixed in with some Polynesians, and they become a bit lighter. So in Hawaii, I was looking at the last queen, and you can see she's a black lady, the last queen that lived. Now, anything after her, they all seem to be lighter, and they married in with Americans or the Europeans and maybe Japanese or whoever. So how would you describe the Pacific race before other groups came in from Europe or America or Asia and mixed in? Because it's funny, I've seen some darker people in Tonga and then some lighter people.
Well, the Pacific and in particular Fiji, with particular reference to Fiji, we basically the Fijians. Well, I stand to be corrected, but in my best opinion, we are of Melanesian. Of the Melanesian group. I think the connections with the other Micronesians and the Polynesians and all only came around during the when the sailors, the early sailors came and the trade started in the Pacific. And Christianity came sometime around 1835, the year 1835. And all these had the most influence it had, which impacted Fiji in terms of its new so-called new racial makeup, is the connections with the Polynesians and the Micronesians and those other groups. That is why some of the Itokes have lighter skins now.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. A lot of people more
otherwise, if there was
yeah.
no influence of that nature, we would still remain pure Melanesians.
That's right. Yeah. 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 That's the way it seems. It seems like when the missionaries came. Now, were these the British, or I'm aware like Captain Cook, he came Cook Islands, he, named after them. Was this the British in Fiji, or was it other countries that came, the missionaries?
Come
When
again?
when
I
the
didn't get you.
colonizers, when the first colonizers, who were the first
Yeah.
European colonizers in Fiji?
The British.
The
The
British.
British came in. The British came in. See, history tells us that there was the burning of um, the home of the American consul, um, and then we couldn't pay that. The governing authority at that time, by the Itoke, by the indigenous, couldn't pay that. So the only option was that for the paramount chief then, who was Zakumbau, the only option was to cede Fiji to Great Britain.
Wow.
Yeah, so that the American Council's residence is cleared, because it was so much in terms of monetary arrears or so to pay off the burning. Yeah, so that's how they got in. Fiji was then ceded to Great Britain in 1874. Christianity came into Fiji in 1835.
Okay.
So already there was the influence of the missionaries here in 1835. People, were started going to the Lord in terms of, renewed souls and becoming Christians.
Yeah.
So, and in 1874, Fiji was ceded to Great Britain. So the colonial period in Fiji was between 1874 to 1970, when Fiji gained independence from the British government, for British colony. Yeah, gained his independence as a British colony.
Okay.
And then from 1970, let me just clear this again. 1874 to 1970 was a colonial period.
Okay.
From 1970, when Fiji gained independence, became a dominion. Okay, because an independent dominion. So that was although we still had during that time, we still had our governor appointed by Her Majesty the Queen by then.
Right.
Yeah. So we were a dominion from 1970 to 1987, when the first military coup took place on the 14th of May, 1987. Right? And yesterday was the day we commemorated the first coup.
Okay.
I mean, we remember the first coup was yesterday.
Right. Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Fiji, the Fijian time, 14th of May. So it was the same. It was the same date way back in 1987.
Okay.
That is when Fiji, from 1987, Fiji became a republic, and we are still a republic today. So there has been, I think, 4 phases of development, 4 phases of growth, 4 phases of improvement in all aspects of life here in Fiji. Before 1874, we had those ages of cannibalism.
Okay. Now, this is the interesting thing.
Can I just pose a question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it connected to African as well? African.
Okay. Now, is a very important thing with cannibalism. Yeah. Now, it's not an African thing. Like, basically, is when the Europeans were colonizing Africa and colonizing many different places, what they did is when they brought Christianity there, they needed the Africans and other indigenous groups to abandon their traditions of their connecting to the ancestors, very spiritual beliefs, and deities and stuff like that. So what they did, they'll tell the Africans that you need to come to the church, become a Christian and abandon your ways so the colonizer can have more power and more influence over. Now, I'm aware that they told, like in Europe, they told that, because when we grew up in the UK, if I speak to people who are much older than me, when they were in schools, what they were being taught, I always asked them, did you just know anything about African history? A lot of the older generations didn't know too much, but they were taught in the schools that we were savages, we were cannibals, we had no history. We were taught all the negative things to make us not want to love who we are and be proud of who we are. And I believe the same thing has been done in the Fiji Islands and other parts of Oceania and wherever indigenous peoples are. Because Europeans, they like to tell our story. So that's like another reason why I came to the Fijians to speak. And you can tell us about your history. We want to hear it from you. We don't need to hear it from Europeans. We hear Europeans, they want to be the voice of the world. But that's impossible. Now, when you start looking at history of cannibalism, you can definitely find this in Europe. Oh yes, even like the story of Count Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, he was a cannibal, he was eating people. So a lot of these stories we hear about in Europe, cannibalism and no civilization, fighting with each other, where if you come to, we were more civilized. Yeah.
We do have a well-known story about a Wesleyan, a Methodist, a priest who went up to the interior of Vitilevu, or the interior of Fiji. I know you probably know this story. Reverend Thomas Baker, have you read that in the history of Fiji?
Thomas Baker, I haven't actually read it. So Thomas Baker, you were telling me about him.
Yeah, Thomas Baker was a Christian missionary. He was one of those first Christian missionaries that came to Fiji. And during the cannibalism time, because we were talking about cannibalism, and I'm connecting this story to that cannibalism period that was many years before the arrival of Christianity into Fiji in 1835. So Thomas Baker had gone up to the highlands where the importance of tribalism was very, very intact, and there was stronger understanding of stronger cultural aspects that everyone in the communal setup had to uphold. One of which was the tambu. Tambu, no, when there's something that's on the hair or head of a chief.
Yeah.
We are not allowed to reach that, and that is how the Reverend took out a comb, and which was the cause of his death, and they had cooked him up, including his footwear, and they, in the process of eating, then they found out that they had an experience of having leather as well from the footwear, and this is in Fiji's museum. Is at the museum here locally. I don't know whether maybe next time around when you come to Fiji, you can always have a look at that.
Yeah.
So that is a telling record of cannibalism in Fiji. There are places in Fiji, there are caves which have recently been identified that had bones, has been there for years, and there's some stories about cannibalism that's connected to it. We have places like, there's some places like, I think we have here in the place in Colombo, in Itasiri, we have other places where there are bones inside caves. We are told that people were, were eaten and were thrown there. People were taken into caves and eaten, and all these are all, yeah.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong.
Having seen the bones and all these, they are claims that, still claims.
Yeah.
In terms of credible evidence, the process of eating, the cannibalism, we don't really know, because we are living this age now.
Yeah. Now, I'm aware
we
of.
did not exist that time, but yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm aware of sometimes in ancient history we have different reasons for cannibalism. One, it can be a time where there's a complete famine, and the only way to survive is to eat humans. Another one is ritualistic purposes. This is more
That's
like,
it.
yeah, it's more like it's quite evil, obviously. Now, I'm aware that some people used to say that your enemy, some people believed that if you eat your enemy, you gain their powers. There's many superstitions behind it. But another thing is with the Europeans, is the problem, you see. If I look back in history at the Greeks, the Romans, and a lot of other people in other parts of Europe, they were living in the Dark Ages. They learned a lot of civilizations when the Greeks and the Romans, especially the Greeks first, when they came to Egypt, they learned civilization. A lot of them used to come to Africa to learn. There's also a time in the Dark Ages where the Moors, the African Moors, went into Europe and civilized a lot of the Europeans. So they're not a reliable source. Some ways it's the archaeology is good, or the anthropology can be good as well, but it's very difficult to listen to the stories of the Europeans when they encountered indigenous peoples, because they came in and enslaved people and colonized and divided people up. So they're not a reliable source. So I'm not saying it's impossible to have cannibalism in any part of the world. There's different reasons why some people can be cannibal. Some, it could be rituals, some it could be famine, and then but as far as like early history in Fiji, like you were saying about the provinces, when the Europeans came, before they came and made these different provinces, and would you consider Fiji at the time before the Europeans came as one tribe, or was it multiple tribes? How would you describe it? And chiefs also, was it how many chiefs? Was it a lot of chiefs, or was it a small number of chiefs?
Yeah, I believe they were multiple tribes.
Multiple tribes.
Yeah, and they had their own allegiance to probably a much senior tribe, or or a tribe that was probably that probably belonged to to some kind of chiefly status, because of that's the setup in Fiji. You have the chiefly tribe, considered to be the chiefly tribe, the tribe that's considered to be chiefly tribe. You have the tribe that's considered to be kingmakers. That's called the Sauturanga. A tribe that's considered to be the chief's herald, which is called the Matanivanua. The tribe that's considered to be the warriors, which is called the Mbati. The tribe that's considered to be the Ngonendao, which are the fishermen. See, we have all these in Fiji. So in one particular tribe, there are these small clans, and their allegiance is with that particular, with the chief of that particular tribe. And then we have, in a much bigger and wider picture, these tribes, they group up and have a much and live and survive in a much bigger group. And they have and this bigger group is headed by another chiefly tribe. I believe this is the setup that was identified by the British, and that's how they turned it into provinces.
Okay. So how many chiefs are there now in Fiji? How many chiefs you have altogether?
We have three. We have three chiefly clans that had the three confederacies.
Yeah.
We have three confederacies. We have
This is a picture of the chief I met. I don't know if you can see how well you can see it. You might not be able to see it too good. I'm not too sure. Well, he's basically it's not far from the First Landing Hotel. It's I think it's called
First Landing.
Yeah, no, it was very close to the First Landing Hotel.
Okay. So that's the Turangatui Bunda. Are you referring to the chief?
Yeah, that's the chief I met. Yeah.
From Vunda, from VCC village?
Yeah. Is it V? It begins with a V, letter V, yeah.
Okay, all right.
I met the spokesman.
The
picture that I sent you, I sent you a picture on Messenger.
The spokesman then was a very educated.
Yeah, and the other guy, the big fella on the picture I sent you was he was considered as the warrior.
Okay.
And it was very interesting because I was interested in their roles, you see, because before we got to meet the chief, we had to go and see the spokesman, and he lived over the road from the chief. Then we had to go into the chief's house, take our shoes off, and we had to go in and we had to sit round waiting for the chief to come out. He was with his wife, the chief, and he was speaking in the Fijian language, and I kept on hearing them saying something about Nigeria because they knew that I had Nigerian descent, and they had to do the clap 3 times. And so he spoke, and they give 3 claps, and then when it was time for me to speak, I had to clap 3 times, and I had to present with a carver plant. I had to be dressed traditional, and then the next day he invited me back.
The Tuivunda is one of the high chiefs of the Western Division, Western Fiji.
Yeah, he said he was a high chief.
He is also one of the high chiefs in Fiji, but in particular for the West, he is regarded as one of the high chiefs of the West.
Yeah,
Western side there. Yeah.
So are these when we say the chiefs, are these a bloodline from the earliest chiefs that came into Fiji? Are they a bloodline, like he would be the great grandson or something?
Yeah, it's not. It is inherited.
It's inherited.
It's an inherited role. It's not earned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Inherited.
Through some kind of a bachelor's degree, and then you become a chief. No, it's inherited.
Inherited.
As you said, it's through bloodline. Yes.
Yeah.
It in some places in Fiji, it could be one can become a chief because of the elderly, because the person is from the older generation.
Yeah.
For example, if my dad is the third, in a siblings of three, right? The older one is the chief. Older sibling is the chief. In some setup in Fiji, some villages, some communal communities, some tribes. I gave you an example. Let me just get back to that example. So say, for example, my dad comes from a family of three siblings. Okay. The older one is the current chief. My dad is the youngest, and there's another one in the middle. Okay. If the older sibling passes away, the eldest son can become the chief.
Yeah.
Instead of the two uncles who are still alive.
Okay. Yeah.
You got it? Some tribes in Fiji have that setup, but some have the next person to be chief is the second sibling.
Okay.
And then the third. And then
Yeah.
it goes back to the son of the first one. You got it?
Yeah.
Right. So that is how it's happening here.
So what is the role of the female? Like, for example, the chief's wife, for example, you know, like the way the Jews have a matriarchal system. What was the role of the female? Like, how much power did they have as females in throughout history?
You can be a lady can be married to a chief, but that does not necessarily make her a chief.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, a lady can be married to a chief, but it does not necessarily make her a chief. She's there as a housewife, and is there being the wife of the chief.
Yeah.
And maybe given the respect that she deserves being the wife of the chief, but in terms of in reality, in real life situation, in terms of giving orders or making decision, you know, it's quite far away from that, because she's just there as the wife of the chief.
Right. Yeah. 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 I noticed a lot of the females in Fiji have afros as well, afro hair, and very proud. You know, very nice to see. You know, people still have afros and they follow the traditions.
Yeah. And probably it's something that has been there from Africa, right?
Yeah, definitely, which I thought was amazing. You know, yeah, and very proud. People have found the Fijians, and now is there a time? I was aware of one time when there was something called blackbirding, and that was I'm not sure if it was actually Fiji, but with any of the Fijians, can you recall taken into slavery by the Europeans, like maybe whether they were taken to Australia, whether they were taken to South America or anywhere? Were you aware of anything?
We could have. Well, see, when the European influence came in, blackbirding.
Blackbirding, that's the one. Yeah, blackbirding. Trick on people to get on the boat.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is how the Solomon Islanders and the people from Vanuatu came into Fiji.
Right. Okay.
They were brought in by the Europeans so that the Fijians were untouched in terms of the communal setup, so that they maintain and continue to uphold their cultural aspirations and cultural knowledge and all other things that's related to their culture.
Yeah.
Without realizing that I don't know whether they did not realize or whether they did it for a purpose, that they were shutting the Fijians, the Itoke, away from the limelight of development. That is why most Itokes are not business entrepreneurs now.
Okay.
They're fully not aware. So we don't know really what was the real motive. Why did the Europeans, did they have to do that? Was it to shut the Tokais or the Fijians away from the limelight of development, or whether their purpose or their motive was to, keep them there in their traditional setup, so that they maintain their culture, they keep safeguard their culture, they maintain their allegiance to their chief, and they continue with that way of life. But as time moved on, now in the modern age, we have come to realize that not many Tokay are well off in business. Not many Tokay, it seems like to some of us, person like me, my interpretation is that we were shut away from the limelight of development.
Definitely.
In terms of modern age development, yeah. And these blackbirding exercise, took the people away from the Solomon Islands and Vanuatu and brought them here. Intermarriage went on. Yeah, because most of these people that came from the Solomons and Vanuatu were slaves, were put in as slaves for the Europeans who were there as managers of the colonial sugar refining offices, colonial sugar refining farms and factories and all that. So that's where they were put. Some
came from India as well.
Molested.
Some people
Come again?
Some people from India, well, a large population.
Yeah, the indentured labor system.
Still
the
there.
Indentured labor system, no more. When Fiji was ceded to Great Britain in 1874, the indentured labor system started in 1879.
Okay.
That's when these Indians were brought from. That's when the Indians were brought from India by the British colonizers. Yeah. And it stopped in 1916. So all this stopped in 1916. Now there's no more indentured system. And you see, this was also done with the same reason. They claim that the Tokays are not to be disturbed in their traditional setup, traditional communal way of living.
Yeah.
Right. So we were made to stay in our villages and to continue with our daily traditional lifestyle routine. Yeah.
Well, I noticed that a lot of the Indians seem to run the businesses in Fiji.
That's it. It. They were given that space, that exposure.
Yeah.
And we were shut away from that.
Yeah, it's terrible when there's interference and they change everything. And also in Fiji, there's a large population of Indians. Would you say half the population or close are from India?
Come again?
I noticed there's a lot of big population of Indians in Fiji. Would you say they are half the population in I know they might not be the majority, or at least half or close to half the population in Fiji are Indian.
A little less than half now because of migration.
Okay.
Yeah, little less than half of the Fijian population because of migration. A lot of them have migrated because of claims of land insecurity and job insecurity, racial issues and all. They are all claims, and it's one's personal choice to be here or not to be here. So they have chosen to migrate.
Yeah. Well, it's important that, because you can get some people, they might travel to Fiji and they might not understand who are the original Fijians. So, I mean, I met some people out there, some Indians, they were taxi drivers or business, and I'll be having a conversation and I'll be saying, "Oh, where are you from?" And they'll say Fiji. And I'm not soft, I know. So I'll say, "Yeah, but you're originally from India." And some of them, if they think that you don't know, they'll just play along as if they're Fijians. But obviously I was explain to them. I'm aware that he's came during the indentured labor times, the late 1800s. So it's only because I was aware of it, that some people might not know.
Most of them. Anyone that was anyone who was born and bred in Fiji goes abroad would always say that he or she is a Fijian.
Yes, yeah.
Or from Fiji, yeah. Very rarely we hear them say that they are from India.
Yeah.
Because definitely they were not born in there. They were born here and they were bred here.
Yeah, that's it. So what land rights, with the land rights, because I'm aware in Fiji, you lease the land. Indigenous Fijians, you're allowed to own your land, aren't you? Indigenous Fijians, you can own the land.
In terms of land rights,
yeah.
The land in Fiji is divided into three divisions. You have the native land, you have the crown land, which belongs to government, and you have the freehold land, which is private or privately owned. So when a citizen owns a freehold land that is privately owned, that's where your land right is. When a citizen takes a lease from government to lease on crown land, on state land, your land rights is within the term of the lease. The lease, the crown land lease, yeah. So as the native lease. So if a citizen, Itoke, or the indigenous or an Indian has a land lease, your land rights is within the land lease period.
Yeah, 99 years.
Yeah. After which it goes back to the original owners.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the original talk about land rights. That's the when we talk about land rights, referring with reference to indigenous land. Native land, that's where the rights are. It goes back to the communal owners.
That's right, yeah. Now, are the Indians not happy with this, or don't they have a problem with it?
Well, the Itoke don't seem to have a problem with giving out their land because there's far too much land for them, and they give it out on lease.
Yeah,
it's that the conditions of the lease that have issues with Itoke, because sometimes the returns don't go back to them, and up until today they still query about returns and how negotiations are done and agreements and many other things attached to it. The Indians during their tenure of lease, probably they must have, they probably had utilized the land the best way they could and may have saved. So, at the end of the day, the land goes back. The Tokais don't have the returns that they were supposed to be having when the land was leased. And so the Tokai are still there while the others get rich and they move on.
Yeah. It's unfortunately that they've started the Indians off to be the business peoples. They have the knowledge how to run the businesses, and and I spoke to some Fijians about this, and it's the same thing in the Caribbean as well, in Guyana and Trinidad. My grandfather's on my mum's side from Trinidad, and the same thing happened there, where the Indians are brought over, indentured laborers, and they seem to be the ones that run all the businesses. So it's a typical thing where Black people are being kept down the most wherever we go in the world. That's one thing that I do see. But we have the strongest spirit. We have the strongest heart. We can survive. Yeah. We can survive in much more unfair, brutal conditions. And this is down to because we are the first creation of the God, in Africa, the first creation. So we have to make the first creation very strong, powerful people, because we have to be here we've been there a lot longer than everybody else. Now, in Fiji now, sacred, which areas in Fiji are the most sacred kind of places and sacred knowledge as far as and also speaking of sacred, where for example sacred science, so like spirituality, like in Egypt they dealt with a lot of spirituality, there was sacred science and a lot of deep knowledge in Fiji.
All the provinces, all the tribes in Fiji, have their own, have their own sacred affairs. Things that they consider to be sacred, and they have their own untold stories.
Yeah, that's right.
Of what's sacred about what they believe or claim to be sacred. That's and there's so many things, that's so many stories that's attached to it, and that's what I believe. There is no particular place that could be referred to as having a sacred affairs, a sacred story that is superior than the other, because equally they have their own sacred affairs. In terms of the stories that we may not know. You see, there's a place in Fiji, I think it's in the Azores, when a girl or teenager is pregnant and is not known, when you look at teenager, a girl who is pregnant is not known. Physically, when you look at the girl, you couldn't tell that the girl is pregnant. But when the girl goes into that mouth of the cave, the mouth of the cave will tell that she's pregnant, because she won't be able to go.
Wow.
See, these are some sacred places. And that's not the only version. There are many other versions in other places in Fiji. Up until today, some have been told, some are known, some are still not known. But they each, well, there's a place in the north. I see that as sacred as well. There's a place in the north. Just from that spring, you could cook anything. You go past the road, you have a spring there. Just imagine. And then there's a hotel there that's called what is it called? Hot Spring Hotel.
Spring Hotel.
Okay.
It's in the north. So just beside the road, you have the hot spring. And everybody, whoever doesn't have gas at home or kerosene or whatever to cook, comes there with the food and gets the food cooked. So that's another sacred piece of history, something that's sacred. How these things that developed to be what it is today is not known. So these are some of the untold history about the sacred affairs of the indigenous people.
So, other parts of Melanesia, like Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, New Caledonia, some of these different places. What's the relationship like with Fiji? Do you interact much? Is there much interaction and similarities, would you say? Is these still, like, do you have like a strong connection? What's the connection like?
Will you repeat what you just said, James, please? I couldn't get you because of the connection.
Okay, different parts of Melanesia. So like Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, New Caledonia. Is there a connection with Fiji that you still have a Melanesian connection? So like you interact
we have we have formalized connections at a much bigger, on a much bigger scale and bigger picture at a national level, and that is called the Melanesian Spearhead Group.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the MSG, and there is a this is the Melanesian Spearhead Group is a regional organization of leaders of Melanesian states.
Okay,
The political leaders of Melanesian states, yeah, and the tenure of leadership, is taken by each of them. They have a term each within a period of time. I don't know, it's probably 2 years or 3 years. They have an election and it goes to another leader. But as you have asked, yes, it is there on a much bigger scale at the regional level.
Great.
And it's referred to as the Melanesian Spearhead Group, the MSG, and the members of which are the Melanesian people of the South Pacific.
Yeah, because I heard a lot of problems in West Papua where the Indonesian military were taken over. So I was just wondering, like, there's a man named Benny Wender who I was following. He was he's a political activist in Papua New Guinea. So that's why I was wondering, like, because sometimes these places you just might need support. You've got to support each other, especially what was happening in West Papua New Guinea with the military taking over from Indonesia. So is the just come together like to support one another? Are you aware of what was going on in West Papua New Guinea?
Well, I'm really not aware because there has been issues there.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of what's the latest there, but
in the past.
But in terms of the Melanesian group, yes, that's a forum where our Melanesian leaders exchange ideas, bilateral relations, trade, and that's where they boost each other's support in terms of Melanesian leadership and dominance in the South Pacific.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's great. I like to see a connection. Very important that like strong ties are built together. Also as well, you are the Assistant Secretary of Fijian Teachers Association. If you could explain a little bit about your role and who it's for.
Well, the Fijian Teachers Association is a union of teachers in Fiji.
Oh, good.
Yeah, Fiji. In terms of Fiji's workforce, the teachers they have the largest percentage in terms of Fiji's workforce, because teachers serve right in the islands, in the remote islands, and you name the farthest place in Fiji, you'll find a school and teachers in that school. So the Fijian Teachers Association is one of the 2 teachers unions in Fiji. The other one is the Fiji Teachers Union, which is the union that was registered to look into the affairs of the Indian teachers.
Okay, right.
Yeah. So you see how when they have been given the opportunity, they have grown. They still have that space, Yeah. So for us, the Melanesians, we have the Fijian Teachers Association. We have a much bigger number in terms of our membership. As I've said, because there are teachers out there in the islands, in the rural, remote areas, in the highlands. We look into the the working conditions and the welfare of our teachers, so that they get the conditions of work that they deserve, which includes the remuneration, monetary returns for them.
Yeah.
So basically, my role is more on ensuring that the records of whatever transpires, whatever discussions and whatever records that's in the association, my role is to ensure that these records are updated and safeguarded.
Good. Yeah.
That is basically, we have the general secretary, because I am the assistant secretary. We have the general secretary who is more a spokesman of takes on the role of a spokesman of the association, and addresses issues that is to do with conditions of work, with the collective bargaining, in terms of putting issues on the table and discussions with government. What we differ in is that I am responsible for records.
Okay. Well, we're coming near to the end of the show, though, but I want to thank you very much, Maika Moroca. This is James Diboe in Scotland, dedicated to original peoples, and it's a blessing to have you on.
Yeah.
So I'll give thanks to you anyway, and maybe we can do a part 2 when you're ready.